Good morning. This is Monday, March the 18th, and this is The Drill. And thank you very much. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States of America today, because I'm the only one that makes the presumption for the status quo. So I'm recording today on a new cell phone. I usually recording on cell phones, and I'm doing it on a new cell phone today. So there's a little bit, might be a little bit different in terms of the sound. So bear with me. But I was listening to Hugh Hewitt this morning at as I'm wont to do it around 5 o'clock my time. It comes on in California time between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. And so I'm listening to him, and he is talking about the news media, and that he expressed the fact that he was very confused about the news media and why the news media is acting that way, the way it is now. And for me, it is simple to understand exactly why. There's nothing to be confused about, although I used to be like him. And a lot of times I used to be, when I was listening to radio or I was reading something, more often than not, I was listening to the radio, watching TV, reading, whatever, to get a sense of direction, to find out what is it another person saying and see whether or not I agree with it. Now, I'm looking at these shows critically to see whether or not these folks actually know what they're talking about. And very often it's disappointing. It's that very often they do not know what they're talking about. In this particular case, Hugh Hewitt wouldn't have any problem understanding the news media if he had familiarized himself with philosophy, which is interesting because philosophy is a course, or philosophical courses are usually what lawyers take pre-law. They'll take those kinds of courses because you got to deal with ethics. You have to deal also with logic and reasoning, and those are usually in philosophy courses. But if he had really studied philosophy, more specifically metaphysics, then he would realize and understand exactly what the news media is up to. And again, years ago, I would have been as confused as he was. Because it seems to the untrained eye, so to speak, that the news media is going bananas. That it seems that a lot of sections of our society, I don't want to say our whole country, but many sections of our society have simply gone insane. And that's what I have said in other broadcasts, that's what the struggle really is sanity in this country. That's what it boils down to. Are we going to be a country that acknowledges reality and is therefore sane, or are we going to be a country that pretends reality doesn't exist and therefore insane? And that's what the news media is doing. There's a philosophical theory it's actually a philosophical mistake. It's generous to call it a theory about metaphysics that suggests or pretends that reality doesn't exist. The idea is that the way one knows about reality is through one's senses, what you see, touch, hear, smell, feel, etc. So the senses can be fooled. And so therefore the senses are unreliable. So therefore the individual cannot know what is objective. The only thing the individual can know is what the individual perceives. And therefore, reality is subjective. That what is real then becomes what the majority says is real. And if that's the case, if reality is a matter of opinion, and then the news departments are people that are going to deal not in reality, not in truth, but in dealing in opinion, and therefore their job becomes to shape opinion and therefore shape reality. Now, once you know that, And then you look at Donald Trump, who doesn't go for that. Most of this shaping reality business is done psychologically, through psychological tactics and techniques. That's what I've learned recently. And I learned a lot of what I'm telling you about now through reading Ayn Rand. It was a very eye-opening experience reading Ayn Rand's books, her nonfiction works. I wouldn't recommend her fiction. It just has a tendency to be rather, I'd recommend the nonfiction. If you want to really know what she's about, read her nonfiction work. Start with Philosophy Who Needs It, Chapter 1, and kind of go from there. But once you get into the philosophy and you understand what the issues have been over the years, and that knowing and understanding that one of the issues metaphysically is the issue of whether or not reality exists. There's a question, sort of a party question, that goes like this. If a tree in a forest falls and no one was around to hear it, did it make a noise? Now, most people would think, well, it's kind of a gag or a joke. I used to think that way anyhow. I kind of dismissed it. Oh, so what? I couldn't even be bothered to think about it. But really what the question is, and for the most part, you really don't need to think about it, but really what it's about is reality. If a tree in a forest falls, no one's around to hear it, and it did not make a noise, you're saying reality doesn't exist. You're saying everything is perceptual in life. Or what you'll hear the left saying in this country is perception is reality. If you know that reality exists, then you will say, well, of course the tree made a noise, even though no one was around to hear it. So, that's that's getting to the issue of, down to the issues of metaphysics. And again, if Hugh Hewitt had studied a little bit of philosophy, and I don't have a PhD in it, but I know a heck of a lot more about it because of my exposure to Ayn Rand than I used to. And it has been extremely helpful in knowing and understanding what is going on in the world around me, particularly what I see on the news. You'll notice also one of the other things that kind of sticks out about the left in this country is their ambivalence, their kind of love-hate relationship with Islamic terrorists. And the reason for that is because of their political philosophy of Marxism, or actually post-Marxism, which says that any oppressed class can lead the revolution that leads to socialist paradise. And so the left has recognized Muslims and Islam as an oppressed class. Now, the Muslims and Islam, particularly radical Islam, are revolutionary in nature. They want a worldwide revolution that ends in Muslim paradise, which is everybody becomes a Muslim or is killed, and the 12th Imam appears, and the whole world becomes one giant theocracy. Now, the left, they love the idea of a revolution, and they love the idea that it's going to get started and may very well end up getting started by terrorists, but what they don't like is the religious aspects of it. So they can claim very much to be anti-terrorist by really claiming to be more anti-religion than anything else, and sort of get away with some faux patriotism there. But they look to Islam to lead the way in the revolution, and they figure that once the Islamic terrorists get the revolution started, that the Harvard graduates, etc., the Harvard left, let's say, can steer the revolution to its logical, secular conclusion. So, but again, this has been an interesting journey for me as a learning about realizing that I had so much more to learn by picking up some of Ayn Rand's works and reading them, and they were extremely eye-opening. They led me to read other books by Mortimer Adler, books that were have to do with, from the introducing series, introducing philosophy, introducing ethics, introducing logic, all of those things. Also, one of the best books that you can pick up is a book by Miriam Joseph called The Trivium, which gets into details about why certain like grammar, logic, and rhetoric are important. It helps you to learn how to think, and it's definitely helped me to learn how to think. And because I can do that, I'm less overwhelmed and baffled and anxious about the things that I see on the news that's going on around me. So, at this point, that brings us to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. And until next time, thank you very much for listening, and have a great day.